Are you a person looking to excel your career towards senior cloud security engineer? Then this video is for you. In this video, I'll be giving 3 tips to perform better at your cloud security engineering interviews. Don't just use these tips to go ahead and crack interviews, rather use them to become better cloud security engineers. If you stick till the end of this video, along with these 3 tips, I'll also give a bonus tip at the end of this video. And with each tip, I'll give you real interview questions, and probably you can also prepare for these questions beforehand and go ahead and ace your interviews. But before that, who am I? Am I even eligible to give this advice to you? I think so. I have been a senior cloud security engineer for the last 3.5 years, and I have been on both sides of the interview table. I've given interviews at multiple companies, especially Indian startups, and I've also taken interviews for roles like senior and junior cloud security engineers. These are not just some random tips. These are tips that I personally follow and I recommend to my friends to use during their interviews to crack interviews. So I hope in this video I conveyed these tips to you. The first step is know what you wrote on your resume. This is a no-brainer, right? Like who on earth would not know what they wrote on the resume? Actually, a lot of them. So when I was the interviewer, when I was looking at resumes and like, okay, got a bunch of resumes, picked the right one. And in the first round, I saw a lot of rejection because people just write a lot of things. Like they blabber a lot of things even that they did not do. Like, okay, they use terms like security. I went ahead and secured lots of VMs, etc., EC2s. But if you ask, like, just explain how you wrote it, they fail. And this is what I feel is the fake it till you make it attitude. A good number of people did not have the opportunity to go ahead and play around with cloud environments and secure their company's cloud environments. So they just faked it. They said, okay, I have been doing AppSec, but a lot of my work was also in cloud security. I went ahead and secured a lot of cloud resources, S3 buckets and all these things. And I'm like, I call myself a cloud security engineer now and want to get into the senior side. But the problem is, while this might get through the HR round, where HRs don't have a lot of technical knowledge on what exactly the person knows or not. However, the first few technical rounds, people will easily find out if you're faking it. So don't fake it. A common question that I get when I say that don't fake it till you make it is, okay, I have never had the actual opportunity to play around and secure cloud environments, but I still want to get into cloud security. That is my passion. Why can't I fake it? Or what is a better alternative? The alternative that I recommend is open source. Even if you do not have the opportunity in your previous workplaces to play around with cloud, there's no one stopping you from creating your own cloud accounts and like go ahead and play around with vulnerable environments. Go ahead and try to write Terraform code to deploy something or create automation out of it. Create projects. So it need not be production level projects. Rather, it could be simple projects that solves one particular cloud security issue. It could be like if you want to remove SSH access to your VMs, how are you going to do that? Like go ahead, deploy your own personal EC2 and play around with it. If you want to show your skills on IAC scanning and securing on the code level, go ahead, create a GitHub repository, add vulnerable Terraform code there, and set a pipeline to ensure that the pipeline scans every time you push Terraform code to the repository. As it finding issues, are you able to go ahead, get the findings and remediate the findings? These are all things that you can do when you don't have opportunity in your previous workplace. Now, you don't have to fake it saying that, okay, I know how to write Terraform or how to secure Terraform or how to do automation. Rather, you say that, okay, I did not have the opportunity, but I do have projects where I have worked on it. So you got your hands dirty, and open source is the best way to showcase your skills. Let's say you followed this don't fake it till you make it approach and you took the hard route of going ahead and creating open source projects and you got the interview call. What next? Let's say tomorrow is your interview. Don't blindly go to the interview. Rather, create a one pager, a small document, or even a text file. Take some time to recall all the things that you have done in the past, especially those that are associated with cloud security. What are your achievements? What are the things that you have done in the past? What are the failures that you had? And what are the things that you learned from it? This could be part of it. And For every interview that happens in in the near future, you can just look up this particular sheet and say that, okay, these are all the accomplishments that I've done, and these are all the learnings, and it becomes just a refresher for you before every interview. So what should you add in that one pager? Examples could be contextual cloud security issues that you mitigated. There could be security issues. Example one that I could think of right now is, how did you segregate your production and non-production environments? How did you ensure that your non-prod users in your non-prod did not have access to production? Like, this is a very business contextual problem. How did you do that? Or what was that particular WAF rule that you wrote in your previous place, and why did you do that? What was the context behind that? So these kind of things. Or you could also talk about in-house tools that you built. What were the Python wrappers that you wrote, or what were the automations that you did, and why did you try to create an in-house tool and not just go with an open source tool or cloud native service? Also focus on the people side of things, not just the tech side. People and process. Like, what were the process you set up? What did you do to ensure not everyone gets a admin access in the cloud? How did you collaborate with other teams, especially the DevOps and infra team? How did you collaborate with them to ensure that people are deploying in a very secure fashion to cloud? And the final one is evaluation of tools and services, and why you selected one over the other. Like, what was that one particular reason or a couple of reasons which made you pick one service over the other? So these kind of examples, write it down, have it ready before every interview call. Just go through that. That would help you recall a lot. Let me give some sample interview questions. The first one is, tell me about a project you did in the past and what you learned from it. This is a classic example. Like, what did you do in the past and what did you learn from it? It's not just accomplishments, it could also be failures. Okay, I evaluated this tool. It was, say, doing runtime analysis, and then all of a sudden it took up a lot of memory and like it crashed, which impacted productivity. This is not something that you should be proud of, but this is one learning in your past where you made a mistake and you ensure that you are not going to make the mistake again. The next question is, what programming language are you familiar with? How did you use it with previous automations? Another good question on, what are the programming languages you know and what did you actually use it for? And the next questions from the interviewer will revolve around this space where, okay, what was the project you did? How was it, etc. So if you didn't have the opportunity to work on any project in your previous workplace, having a GitHub repository or having something that you contributed in the open source would actually help you a lot. So yeah, next, going to the second tip. As you're applying for a senior cloud security engineer role, you must have practical knowledge of the cloud, period. Like, there's no other alternative. You just can't go ahead and memorize all the concepts. You need a practical knowledge of how things work in the cloud. And you don't have to strive for being a multi-cloud person. Rather, one particular cloud that you picked up, you should be strong in that cloud. Don't just memorize things that, okay, this service would do that and that service would do something else. Rather, you try to understand. You get your hands dirty by playing around with the services, doing sample projects, checking out the latest blogs around that and how to use it for your use cases, things like this. Again, if you do not have the opportunity to play around with cloud accounts in your company, especially this is the case with enterprises, who is stopping you from creating your own personal accounts? If you're going on the senior cloud security route to even a staff security engineer, then you need to have your personal accounts to go ahead and spike and play around with, especially in enterprises where there are strict rules on not allowing access to play around. Probably you can, like, there is no one stopping you from spinning up resources in your own accounts. And one point that I need to highlight is, don't depend on the output of commercial tools. When I mean commercial tools, I'm talking about cloud security tools like CSPM, CNAP, etc. Now, these tools are heavily optimized to ensure they give the right findings. But what separates security analysts from security engineers is their understanding about cloud. If you just look at a CNAP tool or CSPM tool and just get the findings without understanding why it's a security risk or what is the context of that security finding, you just go ahead and fix it. For cloud security engineers, it doesn't work that way. As a cloud security engineer, you have to understand multiple things. What is the cloud security risk there? Is it actually a risk to the business? Do we have compensatory controls across, or do we have any of them? So this is what differentiates analysts from security engineers. We are trying to do a different thing. We are trying to prevent as many misconfigurations as possible, make the system as robust and as secure as possible, and just don't blindly trust the findings and go ahead fix it. Obviously, I'm not trying to say that, okay, do not use any commercial tools. Rather, for every finding that you have or everything that you do, understand why you're trying to do it. Why is it the way it is? What is the misconfiguration behind it, etc. Using a particular commercial CSPM tool or CNAP tool must be an add-on on your resume rather than that's the only thing that you did. It should not be that way. Also, one thing before we continue, I've seen certain rules where they call themselves cloud security engineers, but all they do is cloud security analyst role where they look at a bunch of tools and remediate, create tickets, remediate it, and close the ticket. Like this is an analyst role. And how can we differentiate a person who understands cloud and who doesn't understand cloud is with simple questions. Like this is an example question that I've asked others and others have asked me as well when I was interviewing with other companies is just analyze the statement. What happens if I attach security group rule allowing ingress on port 22 from 0.0.0.0, which is like allow ingress from everywhere? Probably pause this video and think for yourself. Number one, is it a security risk? Number two, if yes, what is a security risk? Okay, if you thought that this was a security risk, you're wrong. Like I intentionally did not give the context on where the EC2 is present. Is it in the public subnet or the private subnet? If the EC2 instance is in the private subnet and this security group is attached, it's not a security risk because internet traffic doesn't reach private subnet. Rather, this is just a misconfigured security group, which is not really a security risk. However, if the EC2 is in a public subnet and this rule is associated with it, like this security group is added to that, then it becomes a security risk. Why? Because it allows internet traffic to reach to your port. Crawlers on the internet or brute forces on the internet can directly brute force your port 22's password. Understanding this context and understanding the way how cloud works, that is what makes cloud security engineers best. There is one question that helps identify people who know cloud and who doesn't know cloud and then call themselves cloud security engineers. And how can you understand these concepts? You can do it only when you have practical knowledge. When you go ahead, get your hands dirty on cloud environments, and then you will understand things like this. A few sample interview questions. If you attach the security group allowing port 22, but you have a network ACL denying port 22, what will be the end result in AWS? If you know the answer, probably go ahead, write it in the comments below. The next is one of my favorite questions. What risk does IMDS V2 mitigate? Every single cloud security tool out there is going to say, okay, always migrate from IMD's V1 to V2. Fine. What is the actual security risk that it is mitigating? If you didn't know the answer, go ahead, search it. Like go ahead, experiment yourself and try to understand why is IMDS V2 recommended over IMDS V1. What is the one security risk that it is trying to solve? And the last one is one of my most favorite questions is what can be compensatory controls? And this is not a question in itself. This is rather a sub question. This could be integrated with other questions like, okay, you have a particular context. You were not able to implement certain best practices. What can be the compensatory controls? Like this literally makes me think in every interview. Like there is no single answer for this kind of questions. Like you can't answer this question without understanding what the risk is. And you can't understand what the risk is if you do not have the practical understanding of the cloud. So you see the connection, right? You need practical knowledge. Then you need to understand the security risks that you can have in the cloud platform. And then if you are not able to solve this particular thing, what could be the compensatory controls? So that's it for this step. Moving on to the final one. Expect abstract questions. I think this is the best tip that you will get out of this video, especially if you're going on the senior cloud security engineer interviews. A lot of times you will have very high level interview questions, very abstract questions, and there's no one single answer. And why are these questions even included? The interviewers are trying to assess what is the breadth and depth of your knowledge. So if I ask you, like one example question that I had in my previous interviews or one of my previous interviews was, how would you secure cloud? Let's say, let's assume that you joined the company. How are you going to operationalize cloud security program? That's it. So this is a huge question. This might sound simple, but operationalizing cloud security needs a lot of experience. And this is one question which can differentiate people who have done cloud security and people who just blabber cloud security stuff. And this is the exact reason why I'm very skeptical on those 100 questions for cloud security engineers exams or cloud security engineer interviews, because for juniors it works. For like, it works, these kind of guides works for them perfectly. These kind of abstract questions will not be present in junior interviews. Junior interviews, the interviewer knows what are the questions to be asked and what is the answer for each interview question. Like, there is one question and the interviewer knows what is the expected answer. Like, an example could be, what is the difference between IAM user, role, and group in AWS? So interviewer knows what the answer is, and he is expecting the junior to go ahead and mention it. And for junior cloud security engineers, it's more around, okay, do they understand the platform? Do they know the best practices, the recommended best practices? And do they know how to triage issues from multiple commercial tools or cloud native services? That's it. These kind of 100 interview questions for cloud security interviews is going to work for juniors and not really for seniors, like senior and staff roles. When you're talking about senior cloud security engineer roles, it's not just your technical understanding, it is in-depth technical understanding. And the second is your strategic planning. When I mean in-depth technical understanding, it's not just your understanding of how does a service work, etc. Rather, questions are around, why is one solution over the other? Like, every cloud platform gives at least two or three ways to do the same thing. Like, why did you choose one particular solution over the other? Why did you choose, say, guard duty over inspector? And obviously, this question itself is wrong, but the interviewer wants to understand what is your understanding about these services. Technical understanding questions could also include cost benefit analysis. Let's say we are spending 100K on guard duty or similar service. Number one, should we be spending it? Should we be even enabling guard duty service? Number two, if we are doing it, what is your rationale? Like, why should we keep it running or why should we shut it down? And third is, if we shut down, what could be compensatory controls? And while technical understanding is half of it, like when you compare senior cloud security engineering and the junior interviews, you will see the technical part is just half of the interviews for seniors. For juniors, it's almost everything. But the other half of these interviews are around the strategic planning. The higher you go in the ranks, from junior to senior, senior to staff, you might not go in the managerial path where you don't need to manage a team, but you are going to take certain actions which impacts the entire organization. Like, go ahead, implement a like cloud security program. Go ahead, try to migrate from IMDS V1 to V2 or something similar. So you, as senior security engineer, you are going to take actions and drive these security initiatives across the org. You're going to collaborate with other teams. You are going to improve on the overall architecture of cloud. You are going to build it. You're going to do a lot of design reviews and make the platform more robust and secure. So these kind of questions evaluate your strategic planning with the constraints in place. Questions could be, okay, we have these XYZ constraints. Now, what is your take? Like, what can we go ahead and do? Like, how are you going to, like, the same example that I mentioned earlier is, how are you going to operationalize cloud security? How are you going to set up cloud security program in our company, given that you joined? These kind of questions are strategy questions. They are not technical, like, okay, I'll first enable guard duty, security hub, and a bunch of AWS tools. Rather, it's operationalizing, which needs experience. When you're talking about abstract questions where we have a very high level question and there could be n number of answers for that, there's no one single correct answer for that. So in those cases, when you have abstract questions in place, do not jump to conclusions. Assume less. Try to get as much context as possible before you can go ahead and answer. When I say context, I'm talking about business context, developers, customers, the scale of the cloud accounts, etc. Business could be, okay, where is the business operating? Is it just in one particular country or is it accepting requests across the internet or across all the countries? These kind of contexts would help you answering questions like, what is the best WAF rule that we could write? What is the best way to defend against web application attacks? Context about developers. How are developers deploying to production? Are they using something like Terraform and CI/CD pipelines to deploy? Or are they manually going and logging into the console and deploying it? What about the customers? Where are they? Are we talking about B2B or are we talking about B2C? And finally, the scale of the accounts. Something that works for, say, a handful of AWS accounts might not work for hundreds or thousands of AWS accounts. The strategy would need to be changed as per the scale. Like, for example, I've handled like 20, 30 accounts, including the production AWS accounts, and deploying SCPs I was able to do that within a month. But just change the scale to say hundreds of AWS accounts with each containing tens of thousands of resources, then it's a different scale. I can't just go ahead and deploy SCPs in a month. Maybe it takes more time. So things like this. So get context that is required to answer the question, get context around businesses, developers, customers, and scale. Sample interview questions: how to secure applications that developers deploy to Kubernetes. This seemingly simple question does not talk a lot. Like, we're talking about secure applications, and like the question doesn't say what kind of applications they are. Are they accepting just HTTP and HTTPS traffic, or are they directly ingesting TCP traffic and UDP traffic? Like, what kind of applications are we talking about? Then the next part is developers deploy. How are developers deploying? Are they deploying using pipelines? How are the pipelines integrated? Or how are they deploying basically? Without this context, it is super hard to give actual strategy. The other question that I've got in the past is, if you find a lot of attacks on your web applications, how are you going to protect against it? Now, you need context around where are these attacks originating from and where is the actual customer base. Are we able to say deploy a WAF? Is there something blocking us or stopping us from deploying WAF? What are the other things that we can do, etc.? But before we go to the bonus step, there's one thing to mention. If you want to discuss about other things in cloud security, like market trends or interview tips and how to prepare for interviews, skills to improve on, salary ranges, or switching from a different career path to cloud security, let's say switching from developer or DevOps engineer to cloud security, I could try to make YouTube videos around these topics, but they would be very generic. They can't be very specific to your situation. So if you want to discuss any of these topics, feel free to book a one-on-one call with me. The link is in the description below. The final bonus step is think loudly when answering, especially the abstract questions. When we are talking about abstract questions, these are questions that interviewer is trying to assess your depth and breadth of your knowledge. So there could be places where you know the answer, but you forgot mentioning it because you were trying to imagine or trying to mention what the right strategy or right solution is. So one solution for that is think out loud. Don't think for yourself on what is the best answer. Maybe the best answer you can come up with is not really the best answer. Maybe you lack context or you understood the question wrongly. Rather, go ahead and start speaking out loudly on what you are thinking. Let me give an example from my personal interview experiences. So I was still playing around with Kubernetes and trying to secure Kubernetes and was on an interview. And the interviewer asked, okay, how are you going to secure Kubernetes cluster? Kubernetes is a huge system. Like, there are lots of moving parts. There's a lot of integration and interaction between components, not just the internal Kubernetes components, but also from the cluster to the cloud. Like, there's a lot of calls that happen from pods that gets translated to, say, the cloud APIs. Now, I was thinking out loud and was saying that, okay, first I would go ahead, secure worker nodes and all the things around worker nodes, then talk about pods, interpod communication, etc. I touched a bit upon network, but I forgot to mention what I would do or what solution I would have in place to defend against DDoS attacks. But I still touched upon network and like went ahead to other things like admission controllers, etc. Now the interviewer understood that, okay, I have some knowledge on the networks, but he started asking, the next question was, okay, what would you do if there's a DDoS attack? And then was like, fine, I did not mention that. And then I knew the answer. I just went ahead and like updated my answer and said, okay, for DDoS, you would do so and so things, and that is how you would secure it. So yeah, if you're trying to answer abstract questions, try to think out loud. It might feel awkward when you try doing this for one or two interviews, but trust me, this is how you convey the thought process that you have. The interviewer wants to understand not the best solution. Like, half of the things that you're going to say in an interview is never the best solution. So do not try to be a perfectionist and come up with the best solution. Rather, give your thought process. If you have a security problem in front of you, how are you going to tackle it? What are the different angles from which you're going to tackle it? So that's it in this video. 3 tips and one bonus tip. I hope this video was really helpful for you. And I hope this video helps you level up your career and go to the senior and staff cloud security engineer roles. If you have any questions, feel free to put them on the comment section. I'll try to answer whenever possible. And yeah, please do share this video to other folks who are trying to prepare for their cloud security interviews. Until next time, take care.